The cleaner was fired in front of everyone, but the millionaire's daughter did something unbelievable. In the heart of the bustling city of Crestwood, where skyscrapers gleamed under the golden sun and wealth dictated the rhythm of life, stood the prestigious Sterling Towers, a towering symbol of opulence owned by the enigmatic millionaire, Richard Sterling. The building was not just an office complex, it was a world of its own, where the elite conducted their high-stakes deals, and the less fortunate toiled to keep its pristine image intact. Among the latter was Maria Alvarez, a cleaner who had spent the last 15 years scrubbing floors, dusting desks, and ensuring every corner of Sterling Towers sparkled. Maria, a woman in her late 40s with calloused hands and a warm smile, was a fixture in the building. She arrived at dawn each day, her worn-out sneakers squeaking softly against the polished marble floors. She knew every nook and cranny of the towers, from the executive suites to the janitorial closets. Her colleagues, fellow cleaners and maintenance staff, respected her quiet resilience. To them, Maria was more than just a co-worker, she was a confidant, a motherly figure who always had a kind word or a piece of advice. But to the executives who strode through the glass doors, Maria was invisible, just another faceless worker blending into the background. On a crisp autumn morning, the atmosphere in Sterling Towers was unusually tense. The annual board meeting was scheduled, and Richard Sterling himself was expected to make an appearance. The cleaners had been instructed to ensure the building was flawless, and Maria, as always, led the charge. She moved with purpose, her mop gliding across the floors, her eyes scanning for any imperfection. She didn't complain about the extra hours or the pressure, she never did. Maria had a daughter, Sophia, who was studying at a community college, and every penny Maria earned went toward her education. It was her reason for enduring the long shifts and the aching back. As the morning progressed, the lobby filled with sharply dressed executives, their voices echoing with confidence and authority. Maria kept her head down, focusing on her work, but she couldn't help overhearing snippets of conversation about mergers, profits, and the future of Sterling Enterprises. She paid little mind to it, her world was one of mops and brooms, not boardrooms and balance sheets. At noon, the boardroom on the top floor was abuzz with activity. Richard Sterling, a man whose presence commanded attention, stood at the head of the table. His silver hair and tailored suit gave him an air of untouchable power, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. Beside him sat his daughter, Isabella Sterling, a young woman in her mid-20s with a reputation for being both brilliant and unpredictable. Isabella was the heiress to the Sterling Empire, but unlike her father, she carried a warmth that made her approachable, though few dared to test that boundary. The meeting was in full swing when a commotion broke out in the hallway. Maria, who had been cleaning the executive lounge nearby, had accidentally knocked over a decorative vase while reaching for a high shelf. The vase, an antique worth thousands, shattered into pieces, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the pristine halls. The noise drew the attention of everyone in the vicinity, including Richard Sterling, who stormed out of the boardroom, his face a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he bellowed, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. The other cleaners froze, and Maria, her heart pounding, dropped to her knees to gather the shards of the vase, her hands trembling. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was an accident. I'll pay for it, I swear." "Pay for it?" Richard's voice dripped with disdain. "Do you have any idea what that vase was worth? More than you'd earn in a lifetime scrubbing floors." The executives and staff who had gathered in the hallway watched in silence, their eyes darting between Maria and Richard. The air was thick with tension, and Maria felt the weight of their stares like a physical burden. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor she had cleaned so diligently for years. "You're done here," Richard declared, his voice cold and final. "Pack your things and leave. You're fired." The words hit Maria like a blow. Fired. After 15 years of loyalty, of early mornings and late nights, of never missing a day. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall in front of the man who had just stripped her of her livelihood. The crowd murmured, some with pity, others with indifference. Maria's co-workers stood frozen, too afraid to speak up. The humiliation was unbearable, but Maria straightened her back, clutching the broken pieces of the vase as if they were the last remnants of her dignity. She turned to leave, her steps slow and deliberate, when a voice cut through the silence. "Father, stop. All eyes turned to Isabella Sterling, who had stepped out of the boardroom and now stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in a sleek blazer and skirt, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun, but there was a fire in her eyes that made even her father pause. "This is none of your concern, Isabella," Richard said, his tone softening slightly but still firm. "This woman destroyed company property. She's unfit to work here." Isabella's gaze shifted to Maria, who stood clutching the broken vase, her face a mixture of shame and defiance. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Isabella turned back to her father, her voice steady but laced with conviction. "You're wrong," she said, her words carrying a quiet power that silenced the murmurs around them. "Maria isn't unfit. She's one of the hardest working people in this building. She's been here longer than most of the people in that boardroom, and she's kept this place running while you and your executives make your deals. One mistake doesn't erase 15 years of dedication." The crowd gasped softly. No one spoke to Richard Sterling like that, not even his own daughter. Richard's face darkened, but Isabella pressed on, undeterred. "That vase," she continued, pointing to the shattered remains in Maria's hands, "is just a thing. It's replaceable. Maria isn't. Do you know what she's been through to keep this job? Do you know she's raising a daughter on her own, putting her through college with every cent she earns here? Do you even know her name?" Richard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The hallway was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Isabella took a step closer to Maria, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "I know her name," Isabella said softly, addressing the crowd now. "Her name is Maria Alvarez, and she's not invisible. She's not just a cleaner. She's a person, and she deserves better than to be humiliated in front of everyone for an honest mistake." Maria's eyes widened, her grip on the vase tightening. She had never expected anyone, let alone the millionaire's daughter, to speak up for her. Her throat tightened with emotion, but she remained silent, afraid to break the moment. Isabella turned back to her father. "If you fire Maria, you're not just losing a cleaner. You're losing someone who embodies the kind of loyalty and work ethic you claim to value. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who's unfit to lead this company." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Richard's face was unreadable, but for the first time, he seemed at a loss for words. The executives shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what would happen next. Maria's co-workers exchanged glances, their fear giving way to quiet admiration for Isabella's boldness. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low but controlled. "You're out of line, Isabella. But, perhaps I was hasty." He turned to Maria, his expression still stern but less venomous. "You're not fired. But you'll cover the cost of the vase. Understood?" Maria nodded quickly, relief flooding through her. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Richard turned and walked back to the boardroom, the crowd parting to let him pass. The tension in the hallway began to dissipate, but Isabella wasn't done. She approached Maria, who was still kneeling on the floor, and extended a hand to help her up. "You don't have to thank him," Isabella said quietly, her voice meant only for Maria. "You deserve to be here. And you don't have to pay for that vase." Maria looked up, confused. "But he said." "I'll take care of it," Isabella interrupted, a small smile playing on her lips. "Consider it a gift." Before Maria could respond, Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She pressed it into Maria's hand, her touch gentle but firm. "This is for you," she said. "Open it later." Maria stared at the envelope, her mind racing. She wanted to protest, to say she couldn't accept whatever it was, but something in Isabella's eyes told her to trust her. She nodded, slipping the envelope into her pocket. As the day went on, Maria returned to her work, but the events of the morning lingered in her mind. Her coworkers whispered about Isabella's stand, some calling it reckless, others calling it heroic. Maria didn't know what to think, but she felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. That evening, after her shift ended, Maria sat in the break room, alone with her thoughts. She pulled the envelope from her pocket and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a check, made out to her, for an amount that made her heart stop. It was enough to cover the cost of the vase, and Sophia's college tuition for the next 2 years. There was also a note, written in Isabella's elegant handwriting. "Maria, your work matters. Your daughter's future matters. Keep shining, Isabella." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she clutched the note to her chest. She didn't know how to thank Isabella, or if she'd ever get the chance. But in that moment, she felt seen, valued, and empowered in a way she never had before. The next day, Maria returned to Sterling Towers with her head held high. The vase was replaced, the incident forgotten by most. But Maria carried Isabella's kindness with her, a reminder that even in a world of wealth and power, a single act of compassion could change everything. And in the heart of Sterling Towers, Maria Alvarez was no longer invisible.